Good morning, everyone. I'm Michaela, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. For those that haven't joined our masterclasses before, we run one per month, and we do that for free on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So I'm Michaela Rini, and I've spent, quite a few years. I won't say how many on here because you'll all be trying to age me, but I've spent quite a long time leading teams in fast-paced, quite high-pressured environments, from corporate and larger SME roles to managing international medical programs across different countries, to even building and scaling my own businesses. And over the last 8 years, me and my team have supported over 10,000 leaders through things like workshops, coaching, learning and development programs. And these days, my team and I work with organizations and leaders on the human skills side of leadership. So everything from supporting teams, culture transformation, really helping leaders every single day. That's what we do. And we focus on the stuff that actually makes or breaks whether teams really thrive. And the reason why we do this is because I've seen firsthand what happens when really technically brilliant people get promoted into people leadership roles without anyone supporting them on how to actually do that well and how to lead. So I'm still actively leading a team. So I practice the stuff that I'm going to talk about today every single day. And so what I'm going to share with you is things that really I've learned from my own mistakes, if I'm honest, my own growth, and the ongoing work of really trying to show up as a leader that I want to be, as a better leader. Now, let me start with something that, if I'm really honest, feels a little bit uncomfortable sometimes to share, doesn't it? When we share the feedback moments and things that perhaps haven't gone so well in our careers. But I think often it's through sharing this stuff that it really helps other people, for them to think differently about how they're showing up, how they're working, because we spend so much time in the workplace, don't we? And it's everything that we do. The masterclasses, the reason that we share this one for free every single month is because we're really passionate about supporting more people to show up in a way that feels good to them and a way that's really effective in work. Because, as I say, we're there so much, aren't we? So let me start with something that might sound a little bit familiar to you. Maybe you're in very back-to-back meetings, your inbox is exploding, maybe your to-do list feels a bit endless sometimes, and you're managing your team, putting out fires, making decisions, and you really think you're leading, yeah? But the reality is often we're just reacting to things that are going on around us. So most of us end up in leadership positions, sometimes without thinking about how we actually want to show up for ourselves and for the other people that we're leading. So, if we are technically brilliant, we get promoted, suddenly we're managing people, and often no one actually taught us the most important part of being a leader, which, in my opinion, is how to lead ourselves first. Yeah. Maybe you've even started a business and that you wanted to fix, and that's why you started the business. And now suddenly you have a team of people looking to you for direction. So today, I'm going to share something that changed, honestly, quite a lot of the ways in which I was showing up at work and for myself and for my team. I'm going to share a piece of feedback that was difficult to hear, and the framework that really helped me understand where my power actually lives, and the stuff that maybe I was putting energy into that I didn't really need to worry about so much, or maybe was a bit distracting to the core things that I really wanted to do. So we're going to talk about some really simple practices that have really helped me shape and transform how I show we support the leaders that we work with as well. So maybe you can take some good stuff from this that will help you. So hopefully at the end of the session, you'll have some practical tools that you can use immediately, really simple, actionable stuff. This is helpful I believe, no matter what your job title or role is at work, this isn't just for those who are leading a team, but any contributor in the workplace. Yeah. If you want to add in any questions or ask anything, feel free to drop those in the chat as we go. And yeah, let's get started. Let's get into the content for the day. So I'm going to confess something a little bit embarrassing, if I'm honest, but you'll get to know me quite well if you keep tuning into these masterclasses or following my random stories on LinkedIn or on our newsletter as well. So you're probably quite used to this if you've tuned in for a while. But at one point in my career, for months and months, I'll be honest, I was secretly loving being the go-to person. Yeah. When one of the other directors, so I was in a senior leadership team, one of the other directors often gave quite unclear instructions on projects, on tasks, on kind of large scale things that we were all working on to make happen. We were going through quite a lot of change. We were building a lot of new ways of working and processes. And often what they shared with people in the team was quite confusing. They didn't have that much clarity in how they were communicating, how they were delegating. So people in the team would come to me to figure out what the hell they actually needed to do and what was expected of them. And instead of being frustrated by this obvious communication breakdown, I really loved it. My ego was having an absolute field day. I felt needed. I felt important. I felt like I was adding value by being this kind of translator in the team. And the problem was that obviously that was a really deeply inefficient way for myself and the rest of the team to be working. And I knew this, but I wasn't really doing anything about it. And the reason that I wasn't doing anything about it is because I felt like the feedback conversation with that particular director would be uncomfortable. So I really leaned out of doing anything about it. Yeah. I didn't give that director feedback right away. And if I'm really honest, I was probably just hoping that it would somehow figure itself out. But guess what? That never happens, does it? It all sounds good. If that was the way, the world would be much easier. And what was happening often in the meetings I was going to is that the team started saying that we always needed more resource. Yeah. Another hire would really help with the workload. That's what everyone kept saying. And sometimes I think to the team, it actually felt easier to just hire more people, bring more people into the team, get more resource, more help, than actually having some of the difficult conversations that we were all avoiding. So I was in yet another team meeting where someone suggested we needed to hire more people. And I'm sitting there thinking, really, again? I was wondering how this was going to affect our cash flow, the forecasting that we'd been meticulously working on and trying to, stick to. And instead of just nodding along, like I might have usually been doing, because I didn't want to actually face the challenges and the problems that we were really needing to deal with, for once, I actually stopped and thought, hold on, what if we're actually looking at this completely wrong? And so I went away back to my desk and I just sat there for 20 minutes, which probably at that point in my life, sitting for 20 minutes and just reflecting on a meeting and reflecting on a problem was probably not happening very often because I was in a lot of back-to-back meetings and not necessarily giving myself any headspace. What these bottlenecks that we kept hitting were showing, the patterns that kept repeating over and over and over. And we weren't overwhelmed, what I kind of came to the conclusion of, because we didn't have enough people. We were overwhelmed because half of the team was spending their time trying to kind of decipher and decode what this particular director was actually wanting, and then coming to me for translation. So all of us were getting caught up in this poor communication trap, and we didn't need more people. What we needed was better communication in the team and much more effective ways of giving feedback to each other and having that kind of feedback loop and system embedded into our culture rather than just avoiding stuff. And I think more than that, the big thing this moment taught me is that I really needed to look at my part in this because I was enabling it. Yeah. My ego, my feeling of being important, the go-to person, seen as the problem solver, although that might have felt good to me in the moment and in the short term, I was actually a massive part of the problem. Realization really led me to get more feedback. Yeah. And when you choose as a leader or as an contributor, anyone in the workplace, to start getting more feedback, you really have to be prepared for the praise, the celebratory stuff, as well as the things that are a bit harder to hear about, maybe where we're holding things back in the team, or that developmental stuff that's really, really important so that we know how to grow and learn, but it can be a little bit hard to hear. So that realization, that moment, did mean that I started asking for more feedback, which was really helpful. But that's when I got the feedback that really stung. Someone on my team told me that when I felt like I'd explained something and was maybe ready to move on from that particular topic or that project, or across as quite cold, quite switched off, like I was done with the conversation, whether they were ready or not. And that was quite hard to hear. Yeah, really hard to hear because that wasn't how I really saw myself at all. I wanted to be seen as someone who was approachable, who was warm, compassionate, fair, but also was really good at getting the job done and was efficient and could make decisions and make things happen. But they were totally right. Yeah. I was rushing through project updates, not giving people time to ask questions or reflect, and then getting really frustrated when people, in my opinion, didn't pick things up quickly enough. So I was thinking that their pace was maybe too slow for me. But the actual reality was that it wasn't that they were not, as quick as me as picking up stuff and moving on and getting on with it. I wasn't actually giving any of my team, well, this person who in particular who gave me the feedback, I wasn't giving them what they actually needed to succeed. And that's when I really started realizing that I was spending so much of my energy managing my calendar, my tasks, my to-do list, my meetings, that I wasn't actually really leading my pausing to reflect on my behavior, the ways that I was working. I was never really asking what my part was in some of the challenges and issues that we were coming up against. I wasn't creating any space really to have the time to understand my impact on other people or get the feedback that I needed to really be successful in my role. So cold and switched off was the feedback I got from this team member. And it was really hard to hear. I'll be really honest. It's not at all how I would want to come across. But it was such a good learning moment because it reminded me just how valuable feedback is. Yeah. We can spend so much of our lives working on the stuff, putting our energy into fixing things, the problems, the issues, the challenges that are coming up in the workplace. But how often are we actually asking people, how they experience us, how our behavior, our actions are having an impact on them? So here's a little stat that really should kind of terrify us all, but hopefully get us all thinking about what we can do to change this. So only 5% of people get the feedback that they need at work. So this is according to Gallup, who do some incredible research. And they worked with leaders, managers, contributors across multiple sectors, thousands and thousands of people. I think the final kind of research pool for this was about 20,000 people. So it's a big population to review this. And means is that loads of us are wandering around the workplace completely unaware of how our behavior, our words, our actions are impacting those around us. And I was definitely in, at this point, that group of people that wasn't getting the feedback that I needed. And when you're moving that fast, when you're in the back-to-back meetings, the endless emails, the constant firefighting, you do miss a lot of patterns and a lot of behaviors because you don't notice some of those same bottlenecks that keep happening with the same people. You maybe don't notice or see your team working around problems and issues rather than actually solving them and moving forward. Yeah. And you often definitely don't have the time or the headspace to really realize when you are actually part of the problem. So most of us, this is just my belief, most of us don't lack self-awareness because we're unwilling to do the inner work. I think plenty of people are willing to do that inner work. We know that is what we need to do. But we don't do it because we never stop long enough to actually reflect and give ourselves the headspace to really focus on our self-awareness, our self-understanding, so that we can lead in a much more effective way. So today, in the kind of next 25 minutes, 20 minutes maybe, we some of this, and I'm going to show you just some of the areas where your power actually lives and how you can redirect some of your energy there to be more effective in your day-to-day role. Now, I appreciate this is a massive whistle-stop tour, right? We can't do the deep inner work together in these short masterclasses, but maybe if you get some value from this, drop some comments, send me a message, and we'll maybe do a mini series where we do a bit more on this. Yeah. Because there is quite a bit to cover, and you know I love to chat. If anyone has joined before, you will know that about me. Okay, so I'm going to show you something super simple, but it really helped me just put this all into perspective. So this is the circle of control, yeah, and it completely shifted how I think about how I was leading. So most of us spend so much energy trying to control the things that are completely out of our hands at work. Yeah. We look at everything outside of this circle here, you know, other people's opinions of us, the way someone speaks to us, outcomes, the past, time, external events. Yeah. We're focusing a lot of energy in those places. And when we focus there, we tend to get quite exhausted, quite frustrated. We feel powerless because we're pouring our energy into the things we cannot change. And as much as leaders of team, you know, and having people around us, we would love to think that we can change people's motivation levels, that we can completely change people's opinions and behaviors. And unfortunately, often we can't do that. But what we can do is really focus on our self-leadership and redirect our energy there, because then we can get crystal clear on what is in our control and really where we can have an impact in our roles. So look at everything inside this circle. This is my belief where all of our power is, yeah? This is what you get to decide every single day. So things like your boundaries, what you will and won't accept in the teams that you lead, and how people show up, what you say yes to, what you say no to. Your response, so you can't control what happens to you, but you absolutely control how you respond to it. This is where pausing, taking a breath, reflecting before we jump in becomes a real superpower. We can focus on things like our energy, so where we place our focus, where we give our attention, what we do allow to drain us, and we really get to choose that story to tell, like we tell ourselves, you know, that self-talk. You know, we're often our own worst critic, right? Are we going to be our own worst critic, or actually we're going to be our biggest supporter? So these are all of the different things that are within our control. And when I learned this framework, loads of things changed for me, because I realized that I'd been spending so much of my energy trying to control outcomes, worrying about what people thought, wishing that the past had been difficult. But my power was right there. It was right in front of me in how I responded, in my boundaries, in my self-awareness and my self-understanding. So self-leadership is really about getting super clear on these three things. Yeah. Once we've explored the stuff that we're spending our energy on, I think these three things are such a good way of framing what self-leadership is all about. So it's who we are, our values, our non-negotiables, our boundaries, what you stand for, your standards, your ways of working, how you show up, things like your behavior, your presence, your energy. And when you focus on the stuff that's in your control, something really changes, because you stop giving away your time, your energy, your power to what other people think about you, what other people might say, the outcomes that we just simply can't control, or the past that we can't change. And instead, we start really owning like how we show up every single day. Those small, tiny steps, not the big, shiny stuff, but just the everyday stuff. The things that we accept, how we respond to stuff, what you become. And this for me is self-leadership. And until we start to focus, I don't believe that we can truly lead other people effectively, with compassion in a way that actually works for that team, that organization. So how do we actually build this self-awareness, right? Where do we even start? So a really simple tool that I really like, and I think just works really effectively, especially for teams, is what I call the best of me document. And it's an opportunity as a leader to do a bit of self-reflection, to think about how you might answer these questions. So looking at things like, when are you at your best? Having that time to just reflect on, in the workplace, when are you at your absolute best? What conditions help you thrive? How can your team support you better? What might get in your way? What might you struggle with? What might be the best way to communicate with you? So, for example, anyone who knows me well or is tuned into these, in the best way to communicate with me, I would definitely have, don't email me. I don't like email. So, internally, get very few emails. Don't mind externals emailing me, that's fine. But best to communicate with you really does change how you show up every day. And when everyone on your team has one of these best of me documents, I really recommend, it's a great self-awareness tool to just do some reflection, think about these questions, and then share those with each other. You stop guessing how to work with each other, and you start actually being able to do it in a much more effective way. So I really recommend this as a team activity. Give it to people, give them time to reflect. Not everyone wants to jump straight in with their answers, so make sure you create space for this. Let people to really go away and do some deep thinking on it. But when you share these with each other, you're really building that kind of collective awareness. You're saying, this is how I work best, and I want to understand how you work best too. That's how you start to create a culture where people can actually be themselves and do their very best work and be productive and be more efficient. And it really helps with communication, because you might well uncover things that you didn't know about each other, things that you didn't know pissed each other off, things that will smooth out and make the way in which you work together and communicate much more simple, smoother, more effective. So it's a simple tool, but it's a good one. So if you want access to the full tool, just drop me a message and I'll send it to you. But even just starting by going through those questions in a notebook is a really great way to use. That's what I always say. So I don't know if I always say that. I've just added that in. But hey, I think it's true. Simpler the better. We don't need anything complex. Life is complex enough. So when I got that feedback about coming across as cold, I realized I couldn't just hope that I would remember to keep reflecting on my leadership and keep getting feedback and keep, remembering to do that. I don't know about you, but when life gets busy, often those good practices that we've put in place, like, slip to the bottom of the list. So I needed a really simple system that would help me keep coming back to this reflection stuff and getting insights from other people. So I created this really simple weekly practice. The total time, honestly, is about 10 minutes, maybe sometimes less. So any of you out there who's saying, oh, I don't have time for this, well, You do. You're just not prioritizing it. That's the first thing. But also, it doesn't need to take too long. Yeah, you can spend longer on it if you wish, but I honestly can get it done in 10 minutes. But the impact is massive. So let me just talk you through quickly what this is. So the first thing is Feedback Friday. And again, you can bring your team into this stuff as well. But every Friday, I identify at least 3 people that I've been interacting with that week to give some celebratory, encouraging feedback to about something they did that week. Now, this isn't me just thinking being toxic positive or anything like that. Not at all. I think you have to be really specific about the impact of that feedback. But this could be team members, it could be clients, it could be suppliers, it could be anyone in your work world. Now, I try to build feedback into every single day if I can. But this practice of just having it in my diary catches me if I haven't been as intentional during the week about my feedback. So it forces me to really think about and reflect on my different interactions with people, what went well, and to acknowledge the behaviors and actions that I want to see more of in my team or in the people that I interact with. Yeah. And when you consistently give more positive, very specific feedback, people start to trust that you're paying attention, that you really see them, that their work, their interactions with you really matters. And it does build those foundations of trust for when you need to give more developmental feedback that sometimes could feel uncomfortable. So that's my first little feedback practice that I love to do. The second one is I challenge myself to ask for feedback for someone different each week. Yeah. So now that I've finally got to the stage where I'm a bit more comfortable getting feedback, but it has taken time and it is a constant practice. And don't get me wrong, some days it can still feel to hear, but I really challenge myself to ask for feedback from someone different each week. But here's the key. I'm really exact and specific about what I want feedback on, because if you just say, how am I doing? You get kind of woolly, quite generic answers that don't necessarily help you think about how you use that information to develop, to improve, to change something. And remember, when someone does give you feedback, it's just information. It's just information. It's an opinion at that moment in time. It does not reflect on you as a person. Yeah, it's just that behavior, that action that we're looking for. So instead of saying, how am I doing, which puts people on the spot and I don't think really gives them any kind of context, I ask things like, in yesterday's meeting, did I give you enough space to share your perspective? When I delegated that project, was I clear enough about what success looks like? How am I doing interactions? Is there anything I can improve on? I did some feedback yesterday with a client and asked very exact, feedback questions on how we're showing up, how they're interacting with us, different things. Did it work? Did it not? What could be improved? So the more specific you make it, I actually think it's much, much easier for people to give you something actually useful that you can work on. And when you do ask regularly, something really amazing happens. People start to give you feedback naturally. They see that you genuinely want it and that it's also safe to be honest with you. Because when someone knows it's safe to be honest with you and they trust you, then actually you're going to get more useful feedback that helps you improve. And it really helps to start uncovering maybe some of those blind spots in our self-awareness that we just don't know, because we're only human, right? We're messy humans. We are having this human experience for the first time. We are not perfect. What even is perfect? But it really helps us uncover those blind spots. We don't know what we don't know. And so by asking, we can get much closer to understanding what isn't working and really think about, does that align with how I want to show up as a leader? Okay, so the final bit on that kind of little 10-minute practice is I'm just going to have some water. Sorry, I've got a bit of a scratchy throat. Has anyone else had this lurgy that's going around? I just can't fully shift it. And obviously I talk a lot, so that doesn't help. But yes, after every meeting, especially meetings, have you ever been to one of those meetings where something just feels a little bit off, or how you want it to, or the outcomes aren't quite what you were hoping from the meeting, but just something about it doesn't feel good? Yeah. In those meetings, I try and make notes immediately, straight after, while the details are fresh. And I ask myself these three questions. So, what was my role in how that went? What could I have done differently? And what action could I take? Now, this is really crucial because if you don't build in buffer time around meetings, if you are in that back to back chaos of meetings, I don't think you have time to, I mean, you don't have time to even go to the toilet, get a glass of water, never mind time for reflection. So, a definite rule is no back to back meetings. 10 minutes, 15 minutes allows you that space to just really process and think, how do I feel after that meeting? What worked? What didn't work? And this practice, I think, stops you from rushing from one thing to the next without ever pausing to learn anything about what might have just happened, or to really think about how you are showing up in those meetings, what can change, what could get better. And over time, if you do this kind of practice, you'll start to see patterns. So you might notice, oh, I always get defensive when this particular person challenges me, or I tend to rush through explanations when I'm stressed. Or you might notice something like I don't create enough space for quieter team members to contribute. So those patterns that you will uncover from doing this reflective practice, I honestly believe that's where growth lives. That's the real exciting stuff that you can then work on. Yeah, this isn't about reading loads more books, joining all the amazing training programs. But if you do need an amazing training program, here we are. But no, I'm only joking. You can do this stuff yourself, right? It doesn't need to cost money, it doesn't need to cost huge amounts of time, but it really is where growth lives. Okay, so I need to get through this. I'm really struggling. Sorry. So one of the biggest things that actually changed when I started doing these three practices consistently. So not just doing it once and never doing it again, but really, putting the time in yourself to have this space. When I created space for it, and because I was asking for regular feedback, people started to give me a lot more feedback naturally, even without me asking. And so it meant that I was uncovering more blind spots. And honestly, it's been eye-opening. Sometimes it's been really awkward as well, but it's always been valuable. And instead of when I, came across as cold, when I thought I was being efficient, I now take time to ensure that when I am delegating stuff, it's clear, it's understood, and I create much more space for questions, reflection, information from the team around me instead of just rushing on to the next thing. I pause, I check in, I ask, do you have what you need? Is this clear? What questions do you have? And those small they've completely changed how I work, and hopefully, most importantly, how people experience working with me. And actually, recently, one of my team members was working remotely for a few days in Norway, and one of their friends that they were, I think they were staying with or co-working with that day, overheard one of our calls and said, "Oh, was that one of your friends at work?" And my team member said, no, that was, and I don't like this phrase, but they said, no, that's my boss. But anyway, that's something I need to deal with. I need to go over that. But their friend was genuinely surprised because they said, oh, but you were laughing. It didn't sound like the kind of conversation you'd be having with like a manager. And the reason my team member told me this, they said to me, so that's an example of being approachable and really easy to talk to. And honestly, that feedback meant so much to me because it really showed me the complete opposite of where I had started in my leadership journey, as someone who could come across as maybe cold, switched off, focused on the tasks. And none of that happened because I did anything hugely, spent loads of money on coaching and development. It happened because I was consistently did these small practices. I focused on the stuff that was in my control. I was asking for feedback. I was reflecting and adjusting. That for me is self-leadership. Yeah, that's where the magic of all this stuff really comes together. And this isn't me saying in any stretch, like any kind of, I don't know what the word was I was thinking there, but no stretch of the imagination. This isn't me saying that I now get this stuff perfect every day. I do not, right? We are all human. We are all learning together. We are all trying stuff, experimenting, trying something else, going again. Yeah. But the more that we can actually actively take control of this stuff, keep showing up for ourselves and the people around us, that's what has the impact. It's getting the feedback and, reflecting on it and actually doing something about it. So let me give you a couple of just really practical tips that might help you think about how you set up your week and yourself for success. So the first one is, and again, if you've ever spent any time with me, you've probably heard me say this again, but I'm going to share it because I think it's important. I never look at my email before 10 a.m. unless obviously there's something majorly urgent that I'm waiting for that I need before that time. But generally speaking, every single working day, I protect my morning to focus on my priorities, not anyone else, not what other people needs from me. I use that time for planning, strategic thinking, that deep work I need to get done before the day runs away with me. The other thing that I really focus on is having no back-to-back meetings. Again, making sure that we've got buffer time between meetings, even if it's kind of 10 minutes to process, reflect, prepare for what's next. It makes a massive difference to how present you are. And I think the more that we can be present in our day-to-day work, that really helps the teams around us to feel seen, heard, valued by us, rather than us just dashing on to the next thing and never really having time to breathe. The other thing that I actually do, and again, if it's not in my diary, to be honest, it just doesn't happen. I block in that reflection time, put it in your calendar, put in your, when you're going to do that feedback practice, the end of day meeting reflections, treat it like any other important meeting or task that you're doing. Because if it's not in your diary, you might do it for the first week, but then sooner or later it slips, isn't it? That's what I found. So blocking stuff in makes a big difference. Do that deeper self-understanding. Tools like the Best of Me document. It's simple, it's effective. Get feedback from others. Don't be scared to learn and grow and to hear the stuff that might be a bit uncomfortable, because it's often the harder things to hear that can make the biggest difference. And remember, like I said earlier, it's just someone's opinion. It's not a reflection on you as a person. But I do believe it's the very, very essence of being human to continue to learn and grow and to keep thinking about how we want to show up. And the final kind of one on there is just focus on our circle of control. Yeah. When we feel overwhelmed or powerless or stuck in that loop of back-to-back meetings and a never-ending to-do list, come back to that question of what is actually in my control right now, and then redirect your energy there. These aren't huge dramatic changes that I'm talking about, but they're small, consistent practices that over time make a big difference. So, maybe ask yourself when you are kind of spending your time in that kind of place of not knowing what to do next, or when you are, spending time on and your energy on the stuff that's, maybe have a think and reflect on that. Where have I been spending energy outside of my circle of control? Am I worrying about what people think of me? Am I trying to control outcomes that I can't influence? Am I replaying past conversations with my team, my boss, other people that I just can't change? Really think about what would change for you if you redirected some of that energy back to the stuff that you actually can control. Yeah, our responses, our boundaries, our self-awareness, and our growth. Like, which bit inside that might need our most attention right now? Have a think about that this week, because I think it will really help you think about, like, how you want to show up at work. Because at the end of the day, we have that responsibility and that accountability to decide who we are, how we want to be, and what we choose for our lives. Like, I'm sorry to say, no one is coming to do this for us. It would be easy if they could. And I think self-leadership, it's not about being perfect. It's being intentional with our time. It's about pausing long enough to ask, what was my part in this? What can I learn? And what will I do differently? And then most importantly, actually doing something about it. So for your next steps for the week, just think about what you could maybe choose as one of those practices. Maybe don't try all three, but pick one that maybe lands most with you. Maybe it's the feedback Friday. Maybe it's asking for specific feedback. Maybe it's building in reflection time after your meetings. But identify that kind of one thing that is going to help you move things forward. What has been maybe draining your energy that you could consciously redirect your energy back to something that you can control. Maybe create that best of me document. You maybe don't want to share it with anyone right away, or maybe you start using it with your team, but those questions will start to help you increase your self-awareness. And most importantly, block some time in your diary, make it protected, get that feedback, and really think about how that might help you as you go forward. Remember, I don't believe we can effectively lead others with the compassion and, in the way that we really want to, in the way that works, until we focus on how we lead ourselves first. So this is about, self-awareness, self-understanding, and really thinking about how we set up our weeks, our months for success. So if there are any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you are thinking that this reflection work is great, but I need some help and I want to get some support in how I do this well, we've got something really cool that we're building. It's called Starts With Us, and it's a leadership community for people tired of figuring all of this stuff out on their own. And we're actually looking for founding members who will get 3 months free access to live workshops, group coaching, and an amazing resource library. All we ask for in exchange is honest feedback on what we're building, because we honestly thought that we could build it on our own in isolation, or we could build it with people who are actually going to use it. So if that sounds interesting to you, feel free to drop me a message and we'll get you set up. This is for leaders who want like really practical stuff, real support, and a community of people who were at a very similar stage to you. So thank you so, so much for being here today. As always, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. There's a QR code there where you can join our newsletter. If you like my chat, there's loads of other stories, ramblings, different ideas, tools, tips within our newsletter that we sent out all the time as well. And I hope that the session today is giving you just some practical tools that you can go away and use. It's messy, it's human. So if you do have any questions when you start to use some of this stuff, feel free to send me a message, because I'm always really excited to hear from anyone and help them on this crazy leadership journey that you might be on. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm excited to see you next month.